FedEx moves about 17 million packages every day. But here's the strange part. Almost none of them go straight to where they're headed. Send a package from Nashville to Louisville, and it's only about 155 miles apart by air. FedEx doesn't fly it there directly. It flies to Memphis first, then on to Louisville, a route of roughly 520 miles. That's an extra 365 miles for a package that could have gone straight there. That sounds like a mistake. It's not. Send packages between 10 cities directly, and you need 45 different routes. Send them all through one hub instead, and you only need 10. That one idea turned FedEx into a company worth almost $90 billion. That single decision, routing everything through one hub instead of connecting cities directly, didn't come from a boardroom of logistics experts. It came from a college student's homework assignment that his professor didn't even think would work. To understand how a rejected idea became the backbone of a $90 billion company, you have to start with the man who wrote it and the industry he was trying to fix. Federal Express was born out of a question nobody in the shipping industry was asking. In 1965, a Yale economics student named Fred Smith wrote a term paper describing a delivery system where every package, no matter its origin or destination, would first pass through one central hub. As the well-known story goes, his professor wasn't convinced, and the paper reportedly earned nothing better than a C. At the time, the air freight industry had no real identity of its own. Cargo was an afterthought, stuffed into the belly of passenger planes that were built and scheduled around people, not packages. If a passenger flight was delayed or rerouted, freight was delayed or rerouted with it. There was no company built specifically to move small, time-sensitive packages fast and reliably. Smith didn't build FedEx straight out of college. He served 2 tours as a Marine Corps officer in Vietnam first, then returned home in the early 1970s, a period of oil shocks and rising fuel costs that would nearly sink his company before it got off the ground. In 1971, he incorporated Federal Express. By 1973, the company had set up its central hub in Memphis, chosen for its geography and low weather disruption, and started flying small aircraft loaded with packages into one city, sorting them overnight, then flying them back out. The idea rejected in a classroom was about to be tested in the real world. Before we get into how Fred Smith actually pulled this off, if you're into stories about how companies are really built, hit subscribe and drop a comment letting me know what business you want broken down next. FedEx's first night of operation, April 17, 1973, wasn't glamorous. 14 small Dassault Falcon jets flew into Memphis carrying a grand total of 186 packages, bound for 25 U.S. cities. But that modest number represented something the shipping industry hadn't seen before. Every package, regardless of where it started or where it was headed, funneled through one central point first. The math behind it was simple but powerful. Connect cities directly to each other, and the number of routes needed explodes as you add more cities. Route everything through a single hub instead, and the system scales in a straight line, not an exponential curve. Memphis became that hub chosen for its central U.S. location and its unusually low rate of weather delays, which mattered when the entire business model depended on planes taking off and landing on schedule every single night. The early years were brutal. FedEx lost close to $30 million in its first 2 years, and the company nearly folded before turning its first profit in 1975. But the model was working. Customers were paying for something no one else offered. A guarantee that a package would arrive by the next morning, no exceptions. Then came the break that let the whole system scale. In 1977, Smith led a successful push to deregulate the air cargo industry, freeing FedEx from restrictions that had limited it to small aircraft. The company immediately bought larger jets, expanded its route network, and went public in 1978 to fund the growth. By 1983, Federal Express became the first American company to hit $1 billion in revenue within a decade of launch, without a single acquisition. The hub had scaled from an idea into an industry. By the late 1980s, FedEx had proven something bigger than its own business model. It had proven that the hub-and-spoke system was the correct way to move things at scale, period. Other industries started borrowing it. Passenger airlines restructured their own route networks around central hubs. Years later, Amazon would build its own delivery network on the same core logic. UPS, FedEx's direct competitor, eventually adopted comparable hub systems of its own. The idea a professor once doubted had become the default architecture of global logistics. FedEx didn't stop innovating once the model was proven. It started using its market position to expand beyond overnight air express. In 1989, it acquired Flying Tigers, an air cargo carrier that instantly gave FedEx international routes and landing rights it would have taken years to build on its own, turning FedEx into a truly global operation overnight. The company kept expanding into new categories through the 1990s and 2000s. Ground delivery, freight, and in 2004, a $2.4 billion acquisition of Kinko's, which gave FedEx thousands of retail storefronts and direct access to everyday customers, not just businesses. What started as a single overnight air route between Memphis and 25 cities had transformed into a full logistics ecosystem. Air, ground, freight, and retail, all built on the same hub-and-spoke foundation Fred Smith sketched out in 1965. Today, FedEx moves roughly 17 million packages a day and more than $2 trillion worth of goods every year, serving over 220 countries and territories with more than 500,000 employees. Fiscal year 2025 revenue landed at $87.9 billion, a company built on an idea that started with 186 packages on a single night in Memphis. Fred Smith led FedEx for nearly 5 decades before stepping down as CEO in 2022, handing the role to Raj Subramaniam, and passed away in June 2025. But the system he designed as a 21-year-old college student outlived the classroom that doubted it and became the framework the entire logistics industry now runs on. Hub-and-spoke routing is taught in business schools not as a FedEx case study, but as the default way to think about network design, for shipping, for airlines, for telecommunications, for any system that needs to move things efficiently between many points. FedEx's story hasn't stopped evolving either. In June 2026, the company spun off its freight division into its own publicly traded business, the latest chapter in a company that has spent 5 decades restructuring itself around the same core insight. Sometimes the fastest way from point A to point B isn't a straight line. It's through the hub. FedEx's story isn't really about airplanes or packages. It's about a way of thinking that any business can apply. Here's what the hub-and-spoke revolution teaches us about building something that lasts. Lesson number 1, redesigning the system beats optimizing the old one. Every other shipping company was trying to make point-to-point delivery faster. FedEx asked a completely different question, and that's what created the breakthrough. Lesson number 2, the obviously inefficient choice can be the right one if you're solving for the right variable. Flying a package the wrong way looked wasteful. It wasn't because the real constraint wasn't distance, it was routing complexity. Lesson number 3, infrastructure advantages compound. Once FedEx built the hub, the network, and the fleet, every competitor had to either replicate that entire system or accept being second. That's a moat that gets wider over time, not narrower. Lesson number 4, being right early doesn't mean being validated early. Fred Smith's idea sat rejected in a classroom for 6 years before it became a business, and FedEx still nearly went bankrupt after that. Conviction has to survive long before proof shows up. That's how one rejected idea turned into one of the most valuable logistics networks on Earth. If you enjoyed this breakdown, subscribe for more stories on how companies are really built, and let me know in the comments which business you want broken down next.